The diner
So, the adjustments are working?
black SUV
Yes, much better.
into the
Thank you.
parking lot,
Good.
their
I'll make a
headlights
note.
cutting through the evening darkness. Inside, Emma gripped the edge of the table, her wheelchair positioned beside her. Across from her sat Daniel, still wearing his server's apron, his face pale as he watched the vehicles through the window. "They're here," he whispered. No one in Riverdale Diner could have predicted how a simple question, "Can I sit here?" asked just 3 weeks earlier would lead to this moment that would change both their lives forever. If you're moved by stories of unexpected kindness and life-changing encounters, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming true stories that remind us of the good in humanity. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when Emma Marshall wheeled herself into Riverdale Diner for the first time. At 34, she'd grown accustomed to the stares, the awkward glances, and the occasional whispers that followed her since the accident 5 years ago that had left her paralyzed from the waist down. The physical therapy center had just opened across the street, and she desperately needed a cup of coffee after her session. The diner was packed, the lunch rush in full swing. Every table was occupied except for a small two-seater in the corner where a man in his early 30s sat alone, nursing a cup of coffee while scribbling furiously in a notebook. His server's apron was still tied around his waist, suggesting he worked there but was on break. Emma hesitated, scanning the room one more time. She hated asking for accommodations, hated the way it made her feel like a burden. But her arms ached from the therapy session, and the thought of waiting for a table made her shoulders sag with exhaustion. "Excuse me," she said, approaching the man's table. "Can I sit here? Everywhere else is full." Daniel Turner looked up, dark circles visible under his eyes. He seemed momentarily startled, as though pulled from deep thought. "Oh, yes, of course," he replied, quickly gathering his papers to make room. "Please, join me." Emma noticed his hands were calloused, and a small coffee stain marked the sleeve of his white shirt. As she positioned her wheelchair at the table, she caught sight of what he'd been writing, numbers, calculations, and what looked like a budget. "I'm sorry to interrupt your break," she said, feeling genuinely apologetic. Daniel shook his head. "No need to apologize. I was just trying to make sense of some numbers that refused to cooperate." He offered a tired smile. "I'm Daniel, by the way. I wait tables here." "Emma," she replied. "I just finished my physical therapy session across the street." "First time here." Daniel called over to his colleague. "Hey, Mel, can you get my new friend here whatever she'd like?" "On me." Emma started to protest, but Daniel waved her off. "Consider it a welcome to the neighborhood. Besides, you're saving me from staring at these depressing figures for my entire break." That small act of kindness, so simple yet so rare, was what made Emma return to the diner the following day. And the day after that. Soon, sitting at Daniel's table during his break became something of a ritual. They'd share 15 minutes of conversation before he had to return to work, and she'd linger over her coffee, watching him move efficiently between tables. It was during their 5th meeting that Emma learned Daniel was a single father. "My daughter Lily is 7, he explained, showing Emma a slightly crumpled photo he kept in his wallet. "Her mother left when she was 2. Said she wasn't cut out for motherhood." "That must be hard," Emma said, studying the photo of a smiling little girl with her father's dark curls and dimples. Daniel shrugged. "We manage. I work days here while she's at school, then pick her up and we spend evenings together. On weekends, I deliver pizzas at night after she goes to bed. My neighbor watches her." "2 jobs. That's a lot," Emma remarked. "Medical bills don't pay themselves," Daniel said quietly. "Lily has a heart condition. Nothing immediately life-threatening, but she needs regular checkups, medications, and eventually she might need surgery." He glanced at the notebook he always carried. "That's what all these calculations are about, trying to figure out how to save enough for her care while keeping a roof over our heads." Emma felt a surge of empathy. She understood medical battles all too well. My accident was 5 years ago, she found herself saying. Drunk driver. I was a dance teacher before. She rarely shared this with people she'd just met, but something about Daniel's unpretentious honesty invited reciprocation. Do you still dance? Daniel asked, and Emma appreciated that he didn't immediately assume she couldn't. In my own way, she smiled. I teach adaptive dance now, for kids with disabilities. It doesn't pay much, but it keeps the passion alive. Their friendship deepened with each shared break. Emma began to look forward to those 15 minutes more than anything else in her day. There was something refreshingly authentic about Daniel. He didn't treat her with the awkward pity that so many did, nor did he pretend not to notice her disability. He simply accepted her as she was. 3 weeks into their new routine, Emma arrived at the diner to find Daniel looking more haggard than usual. When he sat down for his break, his hands trembled slightly as he held his coffee. Everything okay? Emma asked. Daniel hesitated. Not really. Lily's doctor called this morning. Her condition has worsened. She needs that surgery sooner than we thought, within the next few months. He rubbed his face. I've been saving, but I'm nowhere near what we need, even with insurance. Emma reached across the table and squeezed his hand. I'm so sorry, Daniel. Is there anything I can do to help? He gave her a weak smile. Just being here helps. Having someone to talk to who doesn't look at me with pity. He paused. Actually, there is something. Lily's been asking about you. I may have mentioned my wheelchair friend with the pretty smile. Would you maybe want to meet her sometime? Emma felt something warm bloom in her chest. I'd love to meet her. The following Saturday, Emma visited Daniel and Lily's modest apartment. It was small but impeccably clean, with colorful children's drawings decorating the refrigerator. Lily, a spirited child despite her condition, was immediately fascinated by Emma's wheelchair. Can I ride on it? She asked within minutes of meeting. Daniel began to scold her, but Emma laughed. Maybe later, if your dad says it's okay. First, I brought something to show you. From her bag, she pulled out a small music box with a ballerina that spun when opened. This was mine when I was your age. The ballerina still dances, even when the world makes it difficult. Lily's eyes widened with delight. Like you and me. We're both special but we can still dance. That evening was the most content Emma had felt in years. They ate spaghetti that Daniel prepared, played board games, and laughed more than Emma could remember laughing since before her accident. When it was time for Lily to go to bed, the little girl insisted Emma read her a story. Your friend is nice, Daddy, Emma overheard Lily whisper as Daniel tucked her in. Can she come back tomorrow? Emma began spending more time with Daniel and Lily, helping with homework, occasionally making dinner when Daniel worked late, even accompanying them to one of Lily's doctor appointments. She found herself thinking about them constantly, about the way Lily's face lit up when telling a story, about how Daniel always seemed to notice when her arms were tired and would silently take over whatever task she was doing without making a fuss about it. One evening, as they sat on Daniel's small balcony after Lily had gone to bed, Emma made a decision. I want to help with Lily's surgery, she said. Daniel immediately shook his head. Emma, no. That's not why I know, she interrupted. I know you'd never ask. But I want to help. I received a settlement after my accident. Most of it went to my medical expenses and adapting my apartment, but there's still some left. It's not enough for the whole surgery, but it could help. I can't take your money, Daniel insisted. Think of it as an investment in our friendship, Emma said softly. In whatever this is becoming. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. And what is this becoming? Emma felt her heart race. Something I never expected. Something I stopped believing could happen for me after the accident. That night, under the stars on a small balcony, Daniel kissed her for the first time. It was gentle and questioning, and Emma felt as though something long dormant inside her had finally awakened. But life rarely follows the paths we imagine. 3 days later, Emma arrived at the diner to find Daniel in an agitated state. His manager, a stern-faced man named Frank, was berating him in front of customers. "Third time this month you've asked for an advance, Turner," Frank was saying. "This isn't a charity." "My daughter's sick, Frank," Daniel replied, his voice tight with restrained emotion. "Her condition's getting worse. I'm asking for my own earned wages, just a week early." "Not my problem," Frank replied coldly. "Either do your job or find another one." Emma watched as Daniel's shoulders slumped in defeat. He turned and saw her, embarrassment washing over his features. That evening, Emma made a phone call she'd been avoiding for years. Her brother Michael had been trying to reconnect since the accident, but Emma had kept him at arm's length, unwilling to face his pity or, worse, his guilt over not being there when she needed him most. "Emma?" Michael sounded shocked to hear her voice. "Is everything okay?" "I need your help," Emma said simply, and proceeded to tell him about Daniel, Lily, and the surgery they couldn't afford. Michael was silent for a long moment after she finished. "You care about these people," he finally said. "It wasn't a question." "More than I thought possible," Emma admitted. "I'll see what I can do," Michael promised. "And Emma? I've missed you." For the next week, Emma didn't mention the call to Daniel. They continued their routine at the diner, and she spent evenings with him and Lily whenever possible. But something had shifted between them, a deepening of trust, a sense that whatever challenges came, they would face them together. Then came the day that would change everything. Emma arrived at the diner for their usual meeting to find Daniel looking pale and distracted. He barely touched his coffee during his break. "Lily had another episode this morning," he finally confessed. "I had to take her to the emergency room before school. They're saying the surgery can't wait much longer." His voice broke. "I don't know what to do, Emma. I've applied for every assistance program, picked up extra shifts, even looked into selling my car, but it's not enough." Emma reached for his hand. "We'll figure something out. I promise." As dusk fell that evening, Emma was still at the diner, having stayed through Daniel's entire shift. They were preparing to leave together to pick up Lily from the neighbors when the first SUV pulled into the parking lot. "What the hell?" Daniel muttered, watching as a second, third, fourth, and finally fifth black SUV parked outside the diner. The vehicles were expensive, the kind rarely seen in their modest neighborhood. The door to the first SUV opened, and Emma felt her breath catch. Michael stepped out, followed by 4 other men and women in business attire. "Emma," Daniel said slowly, "do you know these people?" Before she could answer, the group entered the diner. The few remaining customers and staff fell silent, watching the procession with curiosity. Michael approached their table. "Emma," he said, his voice thick with emotion as he bent to embrace his sister. It was the first time they'd hugged in 5 years. "Daniel," Emma said, her voice trembling slightly, "this is my brother, Michael." Michael extended his hand. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Daniel. Emma has told me a lot about you and your daughter." Daniel shook his hand, confusion evident on his face. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand what's happening." Michael gestured to the people behind him. "These are my colleagues. After Emma called me, I reached out to the foundation I work with, the Children's Cardiac Care Initiative. We review cases of children needing heart surgery whose families face financial hardship." He placed a folder on the table. "We'd like to fully cover Lily's surgery and follow-up care." The diner remained frozen in silence as Daniel stared at the folder, uncomprehending. This is a joke, right?" One of Michael's colleagues, a woman with kind eyes, stepped forward. "It's not a joke, Mr. Turner. Your daughter's case was reviewed and approved unanimously by our board. Everything is arranged with her cardiologist. All you need to do is sign the papers. Daniel's hands shook as he opened the folder. As he read the documents inside, tears began to stream down his face. "I don't understand," he whispered. "Why would you do this for us?" Michael looked at Emma, and she saw in his eyes all the regret and love that had been missing from her life. "Because my sister asked for help," he said simply. "And because your daughter deserves a chance." The entire diner erupted in applause. Frank, who had been watching from behind the counter, looked stunned. Customers who had witnessed Daniel's struggle day after day came forward to pat him on the back, to offer congratulations. Daniel turned to Emma, his eyes filled with wonder and gratitude. "You did this," he said. "After everything you've been through, you still found it in your heart to help us." Emma shook her head. "We help each other. That's what people who care about each other do." 3 months later, Emma sat in the hospital waiting room during Lily's surgery. Daniel paced nervously, stopping occasionally to look out the window where the morning sun was just beginning to rise. "She's going to be fine," Emma assured him, though her own heart raced with concern. "She's strong, like her father." When the surgeon finally emerged with news that the operation had been successful, Daniel collapsed into the chair beside Emma, burying his face in his hands as relief overwhelmed him. "We did it," he whispered. "She's going to have a normal life." During Lily's recovery, Emma practically moved into their apartment, helping with her care, reading to her, and teaching her simple dance movements she could do from her bed. The three of them grew closer with each passing day, forming bonds that felt unbreakable. 6 months after the surgery, Riverdale Diner hosted a special celebration. The same table where Emma had first asked, "Can I sit here?" was decorated with flowers and a small, reserved sign. Frank, who had undergone his own transformation after witnessing the events that night, had closed the diner for a private party. Friends, medical staff who had cared for Lily, Michael and his colleagues, and even some regular customers gathered to celebrate not just Lily's recovery, but something else entirely. Daniel stood nervously at the head of the table, with Lily beside him in a pretty blue dress, bouncing with excitement. When Emma arrived, wheeling herself through the door, the crowd parted to create a path for her. Daniel stepped forward, then did something that made her heart stop. He knelt down in front of her wheelchair, bringing himself to her eye level. "A year ago, you asked if you could sit at my table," he said, his voice carrying through the silent diner. "Today, I'm asking if I can sit at yours for the rest of our lives." He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a simple but elegant ring. "Emma Marshall, will you marry me and make our family complete?" Through tears, Emma nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." As Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, Lily rushed forward to throw her arms around both of them. "Now you'll be my mom for real," she exclaimed. The diner once again erupted in applause and cheers. That evening, as the celebration wound down, Emma found herself sitting at the same corner table where it all began. Michael joined her, pulling up a chair. "Thank you," she said simply. "Not just for Lily, but for coming back into my life when I needed you." Michael smiled. "I always wanted to, you know. I just didn't know how to break through the walls you built." "Sometimes," Emma said, watching as Daniel twirled a laughing Lily around the diner floor in a dance, "the strongest walls can be broken by the simplest questions." 3 SUVs remained in the parking lot as night fell. Michael and his colleagues would return to their lives in the city. But 2 lives had been forever changed in this small diner, all because a woman had found the courage to ask, "Can I sit here?" And in that question was another, deeper one that we all ask in our own ways: will you see me? Will you make space for me in your life? Daniel had answered yes, and in doing so, had allowed love to enter where once there had only been struggle and loneliness. As Emma and Daniel left the diner that night, Lily sleeping peacefully against her father's shoulder, they stepped into a future neither had imagined possible, a future built not on grand gestures or dramatic rescues, but on the quiet courage of making room at the table for someone else, even when your own burden seemed too heavy to bear.